The silence after a battle was always a lie. It wasn't peace, just a hollow space waiting to be filled by the moans of the dying, the crackle of dying fires, and the whisper of scavenger winds. For Kellen, the silence of this particular alien world, with its violet-hued sand and twin moons, was a heavy blanket smothering the last of his energy. He moved through the aftermath like a ghost, his marine-issue boots sinking into the strange, crystalline soil. The acrid tang of ozone and cooked metal was a familiar perfume, one that clung to the back of his throat and promised nightmares. His squad was gone. Their biosigns had flickered out one by one during the chaotic, bloody retreat from the Tovan assault. Now he was alone, his rifle's power cell sitting at a precarious 30%, his nav system spitting out corrupted coordinates. All he had was the stubborn, animal instinct to survive, to put one foot in front of the other until he found something, shelter, a way off this rock, or just a quiet place to die. A sound, softer than the wind, made him freeze. His rifle came up, his body moving on trained reflex, sweeping the jagged landscape of scorched rock and the husks of downed fighters. It came again, a faint, wet gasp. He followed the sound to a deep impact crater, half filled with murky water. And there, propped against the blackened spine of a wrecked Tovan skimmer, was the source, a Tovan warrior. Her distinctive, pearlescent gray skin was marbled with soot and the vivid cerulean of her blood. Her form-fitting battle armor was shredded across her torso, but that wasn't the worst of it. His stomach clenched. Below her knees, there was nothing. The wounds were brutally cauterized, likely by a close-range plasma blast. She had been left here, discarded by her retreating kin. A warrior who could no longer fight was a burden, not a comrade. He knew the Tovan philosophy well. It was drilled into every Marine. Ruthless efficiency. He expected to feel hatred, or at least a grim satisfaction. An enemy, broken. Instead, a profound, weary sadness washed over him. She was young, he realized. Her face, though contorted in pain, had elegant, sharp lines, and the intricate, bioluminescent markings that traced her temples and jawline pulsed with a weak, fading light. Her hair, a shock of pure white against the gray of her skin, was matted with blood and dirt. Her eyes fluttered open. They were a startling, deep amethyst, and they fixed on him with immediate, lucid hatred. Her hand scrambled at her hip, finding no weapon. A stream of guttural, musical words spilled from her lips, his helmet's translator struggling for a moment before rendering it. Defiler, spawn of a dying sun. Finish it. Kellen slowly, carefully lowered his rifle and knelt, keeping a respectful distance. I'm not here to finish anything, he said, his voice rough through his helmet's vocator. She spat a glob of bluting phlegm into the dirt between them. Lies, your kind knows only death. Maybe, he admitted, unslinging his pack. But I'm fresh out of it for today. He pulled out his field medkit, the contents pitifully inadequate for her injuries. Human biogel and stim packs wouldn't do much for Tovan physiology, but the universal trauma nanits might at least stabilize her system shock. She watched him, her amethyst eyes wide with a mixture of fury and disbelief. What are you doing? My job, he grunted, prepping a nanite injector. Believe it or not, it used to involve saving lives, not just taking them. You are insane. My people are gone. I am already dead. This is a desecration. He moved closer, his movements slow and deliberate. What's your name? She stared at him as if he'd asked her to recite poetry. Why? Because if I'm going to risk my neck for you, I'd like to know what to call you. I'm Kellen. A long silence stretched between them, broken only by her ragged breathing. The fight seemed to drain from her, replaced by a bone-deep exhaustion. Anya, she whispered finally, the name a soft sigh. Warrior of the 7th Talon. Well, Anya of the 7th Talon, Kellen said, pressing the injector to the less damaged skin of her neck. It hissed, and she flinched. Seems your day's about to get a lot more interesting. The nanits worked fast. Some color returned to her markings, and her breathing evened out slightly. She looked at him, her gaze no longer hateful, but deeply, profoundly confused. Why would you do this? I would not do the same for you. He looked around at the wasteland, at the corpses of humans and Tovan alike, their blood mingling in the violet sand. I've been fighting this war for 3 years. he said softly, more to himself than to her. I've lost friends, I've followed orders that made me sick, and I've started to forget what any of it was for. Maybe saving you. Maybe that's a reason I can actually live with. He began the difficult work of constructing a makeshift travois from the wrecked skimmer's struts and his own survival blanket. Anya watched him, her proud head bowed. When he was done, he gently, carefully lifted her onto it. She was surprisingly light, her body lean and strong despite her injuries. She didn't protest, but her hands gripped the edges of the blanket tightly, her knuckles pale. As he started to drag her away from the crater, she spoke again, her voice so quiet he almost missed it. They will hunt us. My people, if they find you with me. And yours, if they find you with me. Kellen adjusted his grip on the travois poles and looked back at the path. They were leaving in the sand. Let them, he said, a strange new resolve settling in his chest. We're not theirs anymore. He pulled her forward, away from the battlefield, into the uncertain twilight of the alien desert. The Marine and the warrior, to broken pieces from opposite sides of a stupid war, now bound together by a single, inexplicable act of mercy. And as the second moon rose, painting the world in silver, Kellen knew, with a certainty that terrified him, that nothing would ever be the same. The cave was a blessing, a deep fissure in a rust-colored cliff face hidden behind a curtain of weeping, phosphorescent moss. It was dry, sheltered from the planet's biting night winds, and, as far as Kellen's scanner could tell, devoid of any large local predators. He dragged Anya inside, the soft glow from the moss providing just enough light to see by. He worked in silence, establishing a perimeter with motion sensors, spreading out a thermal bedroll, and activating a small heating unit. The familiar routines of survival were a comfort, an anchor in the surreal reality he now found himself in. Anya watched him from the travois, her amethyst eyes tracking his every move. The initial shock had worn off, replaced by a wary, calculating stillness. Here, he said, offering her a water canteen. It's filtered. Should be safe. She hesitated, then took it, her long, elegant fingers brushing against his gloved hand. She drank greedily, a little of the tension leaving her shoulders. Thank you, she said, the words seeming to surprise her as much as they did him. He nodded, sitting back against the cave wall with a weary groan. He finally took his helmet off, running a hand through his sweat-damp, dark hair. The cave air was cool on his face. He saw her studying his features, the stubble on his jaw, the tired lines around his brown eyes, the faded scar on his cheekbone. You look younger than I expected, she remarked. He gave a short, humorless laugh. The war ages you on the inside. What about you? You can't have been a warrior long enough, she said evasively, her gaze dropping to the stumps of her legs. A spasm of pain, both physical and psychic, crossed her face. She wrapped her arms around herself. It is strange. I can still feel them. The ghost of my feet, the aching muscles that are no longer there. Phantom limb pain. Kellen said, it's common. My brother lost an arm. He said it took a long time for the feeling to fade. She looked at him, truly looking at him now. Not as a human or an enemy, but as a person. You had a life before this. Everyone did. He pulled out a nutrient bar, broke it in half, and offered her a piece. It's not gourmet, but it'll keep you going. She accepted it, nibbling at the corner. Her nose wrinkled. It tastes like dust and regret. A genuine smile touched his lips for the first time in weeks. That's the secret family recipe. The ghost of a smile touched her own lips in return, a fleeting, beautiful thing that lit up her severe features. It vanished as quickly as it came. Why are you being kind to me, Kellen? It does not make sense. I am a burden, a liability. Your logic is flawed. Maybe my logic is tired. He sighed, leaning his head back. Maybe I'm just sick of the sound of guns and the taste of hatred. Maybe. He looked at her, at the proud, broken creature sitting across from him. Maybe I saw you there, and I saw something else. Not an enemy, just someone who was hurt. And I was just so tired of walking away. Her gaze was intense, searching. On my world, strength is everything. Compassion is a crack in your armor. To show mercy is to show weakness. On my world, we have a saying, he replied softly. The strongest hearts have the most scars. It takes more strength to care, Anya, than it does to destroy. Anyone can pull a trigger. It takes a real warrior to lay down their weapon. The air between them shifted. The cave felt smaller, the space between their bodies charged with a new, unspoken understanding. The silence was no longer hostile, but contemplative, almost intimate. I was not always a warrior of the seventh talon, she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. I was artisan. I worked with light and crystal, creating patterns for the spires of our cities. She said it like a confession, a shameful secret. Kellen looked at her, at the warrior's markings on her face, the muscular build of her arms. It was hard to imagine. What happened? The war happened, she said, her voice hardening. Our males were dying. They conscripted the females who showed physical promise. They retrained us, remade us. She gestured to her body. They forged me into a weapon. They stripped away the artisan and built a killer in her place. And the woman who worked with light. He asked, what happened to her? Anya was silent for a long time, her eyes lost in the soft glow of the moss. I thought she was dead, she finally whispered. Until today. Until a human marine looked at me and saw something worth saving, even when I saw nothing myself. Their eyes met and held. The space between them seemed to shrink. Kellen could feel the heat of her body, smell the scent of ozone, alien earth, and her own unique, floral scent. He saw the conflict in her eyes that ingrained suspicion of the enemy, warring with the dawning, terrifying realization of a connection that defied all reason. Slowly, hesitantly, he reached out his hand, not to touch her, but to lay it palm up on the ground between them. An offering, a question. She looked at his hand, then back to his face. Her own hand, resting on her thigh, trembled slightly. The bioluminescent markings on her skin pulsed with a soft, rhythmic light, betraying the quickening of her pulse. The warrior in her screamed that this was a trap, a human trick. The woman who worked with light, the one she thought long buried, saw only kindness in his tired eyes. With a breath that shuddered in her chest, she moved her hand. Her fingertips, cool and smooth, brushed against his calloused, warm palm. It was just a touch, a simple, fleeting contact. But in the quiet of the cave, with the two moons rising over a war-torn world, it felt like the first note of a new song, a fragile and beautiful melody begun in the wreckage of two broken lives. The night was long and filled with ghosts. Enya's sleep was fitful, plagued by nightmares that made her cry out in her native tongue, her body seizing with phantom pains. Each time, Kellen was there, his voice a low, steady anchor in the darkness, pulling her back from the edge. He didn't touch her without permission, but his presence was a constant, a bulwark against the terror. As the first hints of the system's pale sun lightened the cave entrance, she finally fell into a deeper, more peaceful sleep. When she awoke, he was at the mouth of the cave, his broad back to her, watching the alien landscape. The sight of him there, keeping watch, sent a confusing warmth through her chest. You did not sleep, she said, her voice rough with sleep. He glanced back, a faint smile on his face. I caught a few hours. You were having a rough night. It is difficult to remember what you were and to be confronted with what you are. She pushed herself up, wincing. The nanits were working, but the trauma was profound. Kellen brought her more water and another nutrient bar. Tell me about the light and crystals, he said softly. She looked at him, surprised. Why? Because I want to know who Anya was before the seventh talon. I want to know the person, not the soldier. And so, haltingly at first, she began to speak. She told him of the singing spires of her home city, Kellen, structures grown from living crystal that resonated with harmonic frequencies. She described her work, using focused beams of light to etch intricate, ever-changing patterns into the crystal facets, patterns that told stories of her people's history and dreams. Her voice, which had been so hard and flat, became animated, musical. Her hands, which usually were clenched into fists, moved through the air, tracing the shapes of her memories. It was a dance, she said, a distant look in her amethyst eyes. The light, the crystal, my hands. It was all one beautiful, flowing dance. I was not destroying. I was creating. I was adding beauty to the universe. Then the light in her eyes dimmed. The conscription officers came. They said my visual acuity and steady hands were a resource. They said my art was a frivolity when our species was fighting for survival. They took me to a training facility. They broke down the artisan and built up the warrior. They taught me to use my hands not to create, but to kill. They taught me that empathy was a flaw to be burned away. Kellen listened, his heart aching for her. He saw the profound loss, not just of her legs, but of her entire identity. My turn, he said when she fell silent. I wasn't always a Marine. I was going to be a teacher. History. She looked at him, intrigued. A teacher. You wish to shape young minds, not break them? He nodded. I love the stories. The rise and fall of civilizations, the mistakes we kept making, the few shining moments where we got it right. I thought if I could help kids understand the past, they might not repeat it. He let out a long, slow breath. Then the war started. The draft notices came. I watched my students, kids I'd taught, kids with so much potential, ship out and never come back. I felt useless. So the first enlisted. I thought I could make a difference. I thought I could protect people. And did you? Anya asked softly. Make a difference? He gave a hollow laugh. I followed orders. I held a line. I watched friends die for patches of ground we'd later abandon. The only difference I see is the one I'm making right now in this cave. And I'll be court-martialed for treason for it, if I'm ever found. The confession hung in the air between them. A shared understanding of their mutual disillusionment. They were both deserters now, in spirit if not yet in fact. They had both abandoned the cause they were supposed to die for. The last thing I remember before the blast, Anya said, her voice dropping to a whisper, was my unit leader, Jorah. We were retreating. A human mortar landed too close. It took my legs. I looked up, and Jorah was looking right at me. She saw my injuries. She knew I was finished, and she just turned and ran. They all did. I was not a comrade anymore. I was damaged equipment, expendable, tears, glistening and faintly blue, welled in her eyes but did not fall. Tovan warriors did not cry. The betrayal, that was worse than the pain. To know that everything they taught me about strength and unity was a lie. That when you are no longer strong, you are nothing. Kellen couldn't bear the distance any longer. He moved from the cave entrance and sat beside her, not touching, but close. They were wrong, Anya. You are not nothing. What you created, the beauty you brought into the world, that matters more than any battle you ever fought. That is your strength, not your ability to kill, but your ability to create. His words shattered the last of her defenses. A single, traitorous tear traced a path through the dust on her cheek. She looked at him, her expression raw and open, all the warrior's pride stripped away, leaving only the vulnerable, wounded woman beneath. You see that? She breathed, her voice trembling. After everything, you see the artisan? I do, he said, his voice firm and sure. I see her, and she is magnificent. He reached out, his hand hovering near her face, asking a silent question. For a long moment, she just looked at his hand, then she leaned her cheek into his palm. Her skin was cool and soft against his rough warmth. She closed her eyes, a shuddering sigh escaping her lips. It was a surrender, not to an enemy, but to a profound and healing kindness. He leaned forward slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. She didn't. His lips met her forehead in a gentle, lingering kiss. It was not a kiss of passion, but of reverence, acknowledgement of her pain, her loss, and the enduring spirit he saw within her. When he pulled back, her eyes were open, wide and deep, reflecting the soft light of the cave and something else, something new and hopeful. Kellen, she whispered, his name a prayer on her lips. And in that moment, surrounded by the echoes of a war they had both forsaken, the emotional bond between them was sealed, stronger than any armor, more powerful than any weapon. They had found, in each other, the missing piece of their own shattered souls. The days blurred into a fragile, new routine. Kellen foraged for edible fungi and siphoned water from the weeping moss. He tended to Enya's wounds, the universal nanets, and his careful ministrations slowly winning the battle against infection. The cave became their world, a tiny, insulated universe where the war was a distant, ugly dream. And in that universe, something beautiful and terrifying began to bloom. The careful touches grew longer, more intentional. A hand on a shoulder to offer comfort became an arm around her to share warmth. During the cold nights, the space between them when they slept grew smaller, until one morning Kellen woke to find her head resting on his chest. Her white hair fanned out like a silver veil. He didn't move, afraid to shatter the moment, his heart hammering against his ribs. She awoke slowly, her amethyst eyes blinking up at him. Instead of pulling away in shock or shame, she simply nestled closer, a soft, contented sigh escaping her lips. "Your heartbeat is steady," she murmured. "Like a drum, it is." Comforting, his hand, of its own accord, came up to stroke her hair. It was as soft as it looked. "Anya," he breathed, her name a question and an answer all at once. She lifted her head, her gaze searching his. The wariness was gone, replaced by a deep, burning curiosity and a longing she no longer bothered to hide. The neural markings on her skin pulsed with a soft, steady rhythm, mirroring the quickening of his own pulse. "Your people," she said, her voice a husky whisper. "How do they show affection?" His thumb traced the elegant line of her jaw. "Like this," he whispered, and leaned in, capturing her lips with his dot. The kiss was not gentle. It was a conflagration. Weeks of suppressed tension, shared trauma, and burgeoning affection exploded between them. It was a kiss of desperation and hope, of grief for the lives they'd lost and of fierce, defiant joy for the life they might yet build. Her arms wrapped around his neck, pulling him closer. Her cool skin a shocking contrast to the heat flooding his own dot. It was clumsy and perfect. It was the first real either of them had felt in years when they finally broke apart. Both were breathing heavily. Anya's eyes were wide, her lips slightly swollen. "I see," she said, a slow, genuine smile spreading across her face. It transformed her, lighting her from within. A most efficient means of communication. Kellen laughed, a real, joyful sound that echoed in the small cave. He kissed her again, slower this time, pouring all the words he didn't know how to say into the touch dot. It was in the midst of this new, discovered intimacy that the perimeter alarm blared a sharp, piercing whine that shattered their peace. Kellen was on his feet in an instant, rifle in hand. Anya's face hardened, the warrior snapping back into place. "Tovan energy signature," she said, her voice all business, though he could see the fear in her eyes. "A patrol. 2, maybe 3. They found us," Kellen stated, his mind racing. They were trapped. He could never fight off a full patrol, and he couldn't carry Anya and run. "Kellen," Anya said, her voice urgent. She pointed to a narrow crevice at the back of the cave, hidden by a rockfall. "There it is, a tight fit, but it goes deeper. We can hide." He didn't hesitate. He scooped her up. She was learning to hold onto him, her grip firm and sure and squeezed into the crevice. It opened into a small, dark chamber, just large enough for the two of them to crouch in. They waited, listening to the crunch of boots on gravel at the cave entrance. Voices filtered through his helmet's translator, picked up the human energy signature, and a faint Tovan bio sign, fading, the deserter and the cripple. A pathetic end. "Secure the cave. Jorah wants confirmation of the kill." At the name Jorah, Anya stiffened in Kellen's arms. He felt her breath catch. The leader who had abandoned her was here, finishing the job. He looked at her in the near darkness, his eyes asking a silent question. "What do you want to do?" He saw the conflict rage within her, the lifetime of Tovan conditioning, the loyalty to her unit, the ingrained instinct to rejoin her people. And then he saw her look at him, at the man who had carried her, healed her, kissed her. He saw her remember the artisan, the creator. Her expression hardened into one of fierce, clear resolve. She reached for the plasma sidearm he kept in his hip holster. Her eyes never left his as she took it, her grip sure and steady. "I am not going back," she whispered, her voice like steel. "My life is with you." The decision was made. They were in this together. The lead Tovan warrior peered into the crevice, his rifle light piercing the darkness. "In here, I found," Anya fired. A precise, blue plasma bolt took the warrior in the shoulder, spinning him around with a cry. It was a disabling shot, not a killing one. "A message, Jorah," Anya shouted, her voice ringing with a new, unshakable authority. "I am Anya, formerly of the 7th Talon. I am claimed by no one but myself. Tell the Talons that the artisan has chosen her own path. Now, leave us, or the next shot finds its mark. Silence from the cave. Then, a voice, cold and furious Jorah's. You are a traitor to your blood, Anya. And you are a traitor to your comrade. Kellen roared back, his voice amplified by his helmet. You left her to die. We offer more mercy today than you ever did. Take your wounded and go. This is your only warning. A long, tense moment stretched out. Then, the sound of retreating footsteps. The patrol was leaving. The threat of the two of them, fortified in a defensive position, was greater than the reward of capturing a deserter and a cripple. When the sensors showed the area was clear, Kellen let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. He looked at Anya. She was trembling, but her chin was high, her eyes blazing with a fire he had never seen before. She had not just fought for her life. She had fought for their life. She had chosen him, definitively and without hesitation. He took the plasma pistol from her shaking hand and pulled her into a crushing embrace. You were amazing. He breathed into her hair. She clung to him, her body shaking with adrenaline and relief. I am not a Tovan warrior anymore, she said, her voice muffled against his shoulder. I am not just an artisan. I am yours. He held her tighter. And I am yours. In the quiet aftermath, their kiss was different. It was no longer a discovery, but a confirmation. A seal on a pact made not in the heat of battle, but in the quiet. Defiant choice to build a new world from the ashes of the old. They had faced their past and chosen their future. Together, they couldn't stay. The Tovans would report their position, and it was only a matter of time before another patrol, or a human one, came looking. Using scavenged parts from the wreckage, Kellen managed to boost the signal on his damaged comms unit, sending a desperate, encrypted plea on a neutral merchant frequency. It was a gamble. They could be picked up by pirates, sold out to one of the warring factions, or simply ignored. For 2 more days, they waited, their world reduced to the cave and the tense hope that their signal had been heard. Their time was spent in a new, profound intimacy. The fear of discovery had been burned away, leaving only a raw and powerful connection. They talked for hours, sharing stories of their childhoods, their dreams, their silly, mundane memories that now seemed more precious than any military secret. They learned each other's bodies not with the frantic desperation of their first kiss, but with a slow, reverent curiosity, their lovemaking a silent language of promise and healing. On the 3rd day, a ship descended a battered, non-aligned freighter called the Star Weaver. Its captain, a grizzled woman named Exia with cybernetic eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, listened to their story without judgment. Deserters and star-crossed lovers, she grunted, looking between Kellen in his tattered marine armor and Anya, who met her gaze with unflinching pride despite her missing legs. My favorite kind of cargo. Gets me paid and annoys the militaries. Get in. The journey to the neutral rim world of Sanctuary was a blur. Captain Exia, for all her gruffness, was fair. She provided them with a clean cabin and, most miraculously, put them in touch with a contact who could acquire advanced cybernetics. Weeks later, in a clean, white med bay on Sanctuary, Anya stood for the first time. The prosthetic legs were masterworks of engineering, a blend of human and salvaged Tovan tech. They were sleek, articulated from a dark, graphite-colored alloy, with fine, glowing blue lines that traced the joints, mirroring her own bioluminescent markings. She took a step, then another, her movements initially hesitant, then growing more confident with each one. She looked at Kellen, her eyes shining with tears she no longer fought. They are perfect. He just smiled, his own heart too full for words. They built a life, a small, modest home on the outskirts of a settlement, nestled in a valley of strange, singing flora. Kellen found work as a mechanic, his marine training making him adept at fixing the colony's aging machinery. Anya, slowly, tentatively, returned to her art. She couldn't find living crystal, but she discovered a local, light-sensitive resin. Using focused tools and her own incredible patience, she began to create again. Her pieces, ethereal and flowing, began to sell, their unique beauty a testament to her rediscovered soul. One evening, as the planet's 3 moons rose in a glittering arc, they sat on the porch of their home. Anya was working on a new piece, her hands moving with their old, familiar grace. Cullen watched her, the peace in his heart a tangible thing. She looked up, catching his gaze. She set her tools aside and walked over to him, a smooth, powerful motion her new legs had mastered. She settled onto his lap, her arms looping around his neck. "You are staring, my brave human," she murmured, nuzzling his cheek. "I'm just remembering," he said, his hands resting on her waist. "That day in the wreckage. I saw a warrior, broken and proud. I never could have imagined this." She kissed him, soft and deep. "You did not see a warrior that day, Cullen," she corrected gently. "You saw a person, and you offered a hand when the entire universe had offered only a blade." She rested her forehead against his. "You did not just save my life. You gave me back myself. You gave me a world. You gave me love." He held her close, breathing in her scent no longer of ozone and war, but of the clean, floral soap she used and the faint, metallic tang of her new legs. It was the scent of their life, of their peace. In the distance, the singing plants began their evening chorus, a haunting, beautiful melody that filled the valley. It was a song of life, of resilience, of a future forged not in conflict, but in a choice made in the dust of a forgotten battlefield. Anya, the artisan and warrior, was whole. Cullen, the teacher and marine, was home. Their love was a quiet victory, a small, defiant light against the vast darkness of the war. A new dawn they had chosen for themselves, and as the moons shone down upon them, it was enough. It was everything.